Recording in progress.
Hi, greetings, friends. I am Jacque Howard, and on behalf of Trenton 365 presents Jacques R.E.A.C.H, an eclectic mix of content. R.E.A.C.H is an acronym that stands for Recreation, Environment, Art, Civics, and Health. You can find out more by visiting one of the social media sites or the website Trenton 365 or looking up Jacques R.E.A.C.H and the hashtag that follows. This is part two of a recorded segment in partnership with Montclair State University and a New Jersey Spotlight News regarding the 2025 gubernatorial elections. We've been talking briefly about the candidates, and my participants, Brady Rivera and Marc Leckington, have been sharing about their thoughts about the marketing that has been done, the outreach, and some information about the candidates. We're going to pivot now and talk briefly about the economy, the environment, and immigration from their perspectives. And we're going to share this content through Vast Media Network in partnership with New Jersey Spotlight News and Montclair State University. So I want to bring them both on and have them introduce themselves briefly once again. Marc, why don't you go first, and then we'll switch over to Brady, and then we'll get started.
Hey, Marc Leckington, resident of the city of Trenton and a community activist on a bunch of different topics. I'm getting a lot of echo. You guys hearing echo?
I'm good on my side. Brady, about you?
I hear a little bit of an echo also.
Okay. Well, Marc,
Yeah.
is it still there?
Yep. It's a
No,
little bit
why don't
better
we do
now.
this?
It's better now.
It is?
Yep.
Okay. There
Yeah.
you go.
Marc Leckington, city of Trenton resident. Been here about 25 years. In my professional time, I work on affordable housing issues around the state of New Jersey related to our Mount Laurel obligation, which is a unique thing around the country where we obligate all the municipalities to create affordable housing. Beekeeper, dog owner, and skateboarder.
Yeah, right on, Brady.
Brady Rivera, I'm a county committeeman with the Mercer County Democratic Caucus, I'm sorry, Mercer County Democratic Committee. But I'm also with the Progressive Caucus. I forgot to mention that the first time, chair, and also a steering committee member with the Latino Action Network. Local activist here, and definitely just like paying attention to politics and just keeping up to date.
Now you can see why these folks are in my network. And if you'd like to join my network as well, just reach out. The email is Trenton, like the city, the numbers 365 and the word show at gmail.com. Trenton365show at gmail.com. Let's meet over one of the locations that I know and I share via Google Maps. And we can have a cup of coffee. I enjoy having adult beverages and, of course, food. And we can get to know each other. And then you can participate in these gatherings like I'm doing here with Brady and Marc. So Marc and Brady, you both share some information or answer some questions that I had about the gubernatorial election, and a couple of things that came up was that we didn't really feel, and I'm going to include myself in this, we didn't feel like there was a lot of marketing or promotion that was being done outside of some social media outlets. We also talked that the Republican candidate, Chitterelli, was maybe a little bit more outward and maybe a little bit more accessible. But we also agreed that there wasn't a lot of messaging that was going out that made much sense. No one's really saying anything. And they're going to be at the will of what happens at the state level, or excuse me, at the federal level. And we all agreed that, there's concerns about what's happening at the federal level. So what I'd like to do now is kind of loop that back in, like the connection. Let's talk about the connection on the state level and the federal level between the candidates. And if you have any thoughts around any of that, and then we can even lead that into the other subjects of the economy, the environment, and immigration. And if either one of you want to take over and go from there.
For me, I think one of the things that I think one of the reasons why, it's kind of hard to like get a lot of like information about the gubernatorial campaign is also, I mean, kind of a given with the mess that's going on in the federal, definitely drowns out a lot. And since we don't have a lot of local media, which is what most people like to consume, they want to consume, stuff that's close to home. That's what they'll go for because anything more national, more national gets a little bit farther of a reach. They cover a lot of hot spots in a campaign, but not the campaign itself. I've heard some stuff coming out of like Courier News, More Perfect Union, but that's kind of like a little blip out of like the mass of content they produce. Um, so definitely when it comes to like reaching out to them or looking for campaign information, like you really gonna have to go searching for that. So that's something that I think just needs to be like improved upon in general. I think that's just kind of more a social media infrastructure that we have in the state that, we're seeing get more funding cuts as well. So, we're gonna be in a unfortunately more crippled position than we were prior.
Yeah, well said. Something you said, Brady, that really hit me was this idea that there's only so much bandwidth I think that people have to be able to dedicate to kind of things in this bucket, like that, and it's a big bucket, right? I'm capturing like all kinds of stuff. We've got like economic issues, job issues, and then you've got all of the things that are going on in politics. It's really hard to find the time. And then when you do, it's just like, I was describing it to my wife the other day. I was like, I only have so much rage. Like I don't have enough rage to go around to all the topics that I would like to really be upset about, and so there's certain things that we talk about. Like, oh, did you see this thing that happened today? I'm like, no, I'm just like trying to, I don't know if I have the ability to like take on something new. Because as I mentioned in the last segment, I'm really focused on this water utility issue that we're having here in the city, and it consumes a lot of time. So it becomes it's like you have to make a conscious choice. Am I going to dive into this election and get into like all these specifics about these candidates and their plans, and then go beyond the sound bites and the little the 1 minute conversation in the debate to dig into the details to see, hey, is this really valid? Is this something that's like has like legs and funding behind it and policy behind it, or is this just so you're making a decision of like, am I going to dive into all that stuff, or am I just going to sit here and like click through the Drudge Report of all the the crazy things that are going on around the country, and in all these major cities around the country now too. So I feel like that's the struggle. It's like I've only got so much time available for these things, and it's hard to carve off something, especially when I'm sort of kind of predisposed to a certain candidate in this election. It's like it makes me wonder if is this time that is well spent for me to be really digging into the gubernatorial election.
That's interesting because a while ago I had a conversation with an entrepreneur, and I had thought one way about who their market was, and they made it clear that they were looking for anyone who had disposable income, whether that was attracting new folks or retaining folks or whatever. And it kind of makes sense with this. When you have two candidates that are running, that aren't really providing much, might not even have a lot of power to get any of the things done that they need to get done. And if you know that as a civically engaged person, I think you're torn between, am I doing this because it's morally what I should be doing, or am I really doing this because, it's going to make an impact, like especially when you may be leaning one way or the other. But I think what I took out of that is there's a real need for local media of various sorts. Can you both chat from your own thoughts about the importance of getting local journalists, local people who are engaged in local issues, getting information out?
Yeah, it's the entire reason why 2 months ago I started a Substack about the Trenton Water Works. There's literally no coverage whatsoever. I mean, there's some great stories coming out of the Jersey Vindicator. Shout out to Jeff Pillitz. He's been dedicated to this topic for a very long time, and he's got articles going back well over a year on this topic. But the Trentonians maybe done one article in the last 9 months on it, and I don't think the Trenton Times has picked up anything on the waterworks. And it's exactly why I thought, hey, people need to know about some of these wild things that are going on and have gone on with the water department, and how unreliable our system really is, from not only a drinking water perspective, but from a water reliability perspective. The system could literally shut down at any time over some 100-year-old water main that hasn't been improved or replaced. So yeah, I feel you. I mean, this is again the 100% of the reason why I started the Substack, was to get this information out. And I feel like when I'm writing the articles for the Substack, that I'm thinking about these people that are that don't have a tremendous amount of time to dig into 700 pages of DEP reports, to cross-reference them with other things that are available on the internet. And so I'm trying to write in these like little digestible segments, and with well-sourced information, and sort of trying to fill that void. And it's sad that this guy that's talking right now, who didn't know a thing about water utilities 6 months ago, knows so much more than I ever wanted to know about water utilities, and how water is filtered and processed and distributed and all those sorts of things. So it's yeah, you really hit on something that's really close to home for me, Jacques. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. And right on. And I'm glad to be a part of that. And I think that's the impetus of for all of us, right? We want to get into this space where we feel like we're respected, we can grow as much as we want to, and we can actually see something tangible coming of it. And I'm fortunate enough to have been able to ask to do a show, and I'm thankful that I've been able to provide a space. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with you more and encouraging you more with what you're doing, for you to record more, do a podcast, do something on TV, whatever it is, to get the messaging out. Because as we move forward as a society, I think we are those people. Like, there's no longer the 6 o'clock news is everybody's going to that. Like, that's not it. And I think oftentimes we can galvanize more around local things when we have a personal relationship with the folks who we're talking to about these things. These folks know us, they spend time with us, etc. So, like, I'm encouraging you, I'm encouraging Brady and everyone else out there who's going to see this. Um, Consider, your ability for messaging in your own way using the media that is available. Not everyone needs to spend a lot of money to get a podcast or anything like that. It may be as simple as recording yourself talking about something and putting it into a newsletter or whatever. But we can talk more about that later. I want to get back into the other sides and other subjects. I'd like for either one of you just to dive into the topic of immigration. I live in a community where literally on my block, I'm African American and my wife is white, and it's predominantly Hispanic, and Hispanic from several different countries here. And we love the diversity and so forth that's here. We get along great. All of our neighbors, we have a really cool neighborhood. But immigration for us is a concern. We've got a local grocery store nearby, and there has been, members of ICE showing up there. Police and law enforcement are often in the community just visiting the store, so there are some folks who are concerned. Um, and I get it. But I'd like for either of you to dive in and just talk about your current thoughts about, where we are locally and maybe even nationally and statewide on immigration.
I definitely want to speak to this one because coming from the same community from Trenton, I'm Guatemalan. One of the largest communities right now in Trenton that's been growing since like the late 80s, early 90s. Um, and there's a lot of people that I've like people I know personally who's had their family members detained and taken away by ICE. And, this is one of those things that make me nervous because you hear news and reports about um ICE agents coming in and not just like detaining people without documentation, but racially profiling. And even now we got like a Supreme Court I don't know if I would call it a ruling. I forget if it was a ruling or just like an opinion, but they essentially said that, yeah, you can, like, ICE is allowed to essentially racially profile you. If you're speaking Spanish, that's suspicion for them to go and get you. Um, I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born in St. Francis, but if I'm on the phone talking to my parents in Spanish, all of a sudden now they're looking at me. I'm happy to see that there's a lot of local organizations that have rapid response units like Resistencia en Acción, who are based out of Princeton but have a branch here in Trenton. And so when I look at something like that, that's something that's, a federal issue that's making me look at the gubernatorial election, like who's going to defend this community that makes up a huge population of Trenton, who are the workforce of Trenton, who pay taxes, and many of those who aren't even documented paying the taxes still and can't even, benefit from them. And so I'm looking at the gubernatorial candidates and wondering who's going to protect them, who's going to protect the community. One of the issues that comes to my mind right now that I hope I can see support coming from not just the gubernatorial candidates but assembly candidates, since we also have an assembly race throughout the whole state. Who's going to support the Immigrant Trust Act,
Mm.
which is a bill right now that codifies protections for immigrants, and essentially says that the state of New Jersey and local law enforcement will not comply with federal immigration missions unless there's an explicit court order, or that the person that they're going after has an explicit criminal record. Beyond that, they can't just grab, a mother who's cleaning a house and just spoke Spanish at the wrong place and time. And so things like that, you know, affects how I'm going to vote in the assembly race as well as the gubernatorial race. And heck, even council races. At least here on this side of the county, Pretty Blue, I think people have a good idea that their neighbors, um, some of them may be undocumented, and some of their family members may be undocumented, but everyone here is just here to work, to live, raise their kids, raise a family. Um, and we're just trying to just protect that community from essentially legalized federal racial profiling. And I think this even goes beyond just the Hispanic community, but something that affects like the Black community as well. I think this is something I want to harp on as well, that this is not just a Hispanic issue, but I think this is also a Black issue. We saw during the presidential election that Trump and Vance were going out against the Haitian community, saying, they're eating cats and dogs, and they're out here essentially, once again, just the whole violent immigrant barbarian, they're violent trope. And so, if they decide that, there's um, a Black man across the street that, said something they didn't like, they could just say, hey, he's probably Haitian, we'll get him for that. And I think this is something that, it's it goes beyond just the Hispanic community, but it goes beyond broader communities, and we're seeing a lot of a rise in, um, Islamophobia on top of anti-Semitism. And so, this, if you cannot protect the least of us, then the rest of us are also at threat.
Well said. I'm going to put a slightly finer point on something you said about the Immigrant Trust Directive, in that one of the candidates has been quoted as saying that it will be repealed on day one if given the chance, and that is absolutely heartbreaking and scary to me. Yeah, I think the other thing that I think kind of resonated with me, Brady, is this idea that it's now being weaponized. When it was originally pitched in the last election, this idea of this immigration crackdown focused on people that were committing crimes and doing things illegally, and gangs and violence, and all those sorts of things. And we're seeing the data is showing us that these are a tiny percentage of the people that are being disappeared and shipped off, and families are just like lose connection with these people. And it is absolutely heartbreaking. I work with a couple of communities up in North Jersey, up in Essex County, that have huge Haitian populations, and they're seeing just, I don't want to go into too much detail about the situations, but they're seeing some massive impacts locally with these raids and what's happening. And the idea that when you move out of the little comfort areas, what I'll call it, we're in Trenton, we're very diverse and we're very accommodating, and we get along very, very well, as in our little community. But I think as you sort of go off of the turnpike corridor in New Jersey and you get out into some of these sort of mixed these sort of mixed Republican and Democratic areas, these people feel emboldened to weaponize this idea and create situations where they're trying to remove people from their own communities that without any suspicion of any wrongdoing whatsoever. And it just is, again, heartbreaking to watch and read. There's a great story in the New Jersey Vindicator a couple of weeks ago about a raid in Princeton where they pulled over a landscaping company van that was driven by there were about 6 or 8 gentlemen in it, and they found the van on the side of the road with the lunches still in the van, and like no one knew where they were. They had to. It's a fantastic read. Fantastic in that it's well written and well documented, but it's just a heartbreaking story about these people that are just being disappeared.
I want to jump in with that as I'm taking my notes here. Thank you both for that. So I am going to encourage folks to look into the Immigration Trust Act in more detail. And Brady, maybe you can connect me with some other folks, and we can have another conversation soon, so that we can just get some more information out about that. I've been often thinking about like this idea for when ICE is coming and they're doing their whatever they're calling it. I think about the business owners and how they are almost getting away with like no implications whatsoever. And I say that from the perspective of I'd like to see more investigative journalism done on what happens to those businesses that for however long they were operating, they were in essence breaking federal law, one. But two, they were doing a complete disservice to the folks who they employed and however they were employing them. And then if ICE or whoever comes, the government comes, are they being held to any kind of an account for what they've done? Because I believe that there's a lot of small business owners and startup entrepreneurs who are taking advantage of the immigration practices that are going on and the facts and the folks who are here and weaponizing that to have them work for slave wages or no wages, or to then be caught up into other things. I think about a couple of industries predominantly are the food and service industries that are in and around the area. But I also think about the folks who live not far from here in say Princeton or some of the other more affluent communities who have landscaping, who have live-in housekeepers or whatever. And I'd really just would like to get your thoughts on finding out who can do an in-depth dive on these entrepreneurs who are, modern day slave owners in some instances where they're taking advantage of communities, benefiting from it. And then when things don't go their way or they go south or law enforcement gets involved, they get to just walk away scot-free. So if either one of you want to talk about that a little bit, or if we want to just move on to the next one.
I saw a story recently about a roofing company that was that took out their competition by calling ICE, and they literally waited for all these guys to get up on a roof and start doing their work. And once they're up on the roof, it's there's not a lot of opportunity to evacuate. So yeah, they're basically being this guy basically took out his competition by having the entire workforce for his competitor hauled away. So you could you can weaponize it both ways, right? You can take advantage of the workers on the employment side, and then or you can and or leverage it on the on the competition side. It's a very scary time.
Brady, you have anything to add? If not, we'll move on to the next couple of questions here.
Yeah, I think about this another bill that had passed back I believe in 2016, the New Jersey Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, which was something that kind of like tried to address this, but in a very specific sector, which is domestic work. There's a lot of immigrant families that do come to New Jersey, and a lot of them do a lot of work that's essentially under the table type of work, where they may be exploited. They don't really have um, labor protections because it's kind of like a uh, what would I call it? There's no like official contract. There's no like
Mhm.
it's essentially like a lot of people go into domestic work kind of just like looking for someone who like maybe needs their house cleaned or something. And so when they just go out, they just find someone to go, oh well, I need my house clean, and they'll just kind of just do their little negotiations right then and there, but there's no like contract. So it's very easy in a moment like that to be exploited. And so this bill, I believe, sought to address that, to essentially let those domestic workers know what kind of rights they do have, and so that they couldn't be exploited um, by those employers, because a lot of situations would happen that once they whoever may have employed this worker to be a domestic worker in their household, uh, find that they don't want to pay them anymore, or that they're done with their services. Sometimes they will just rat them out, say, hey, this person is actually working under the table, and I just want to get rid of them. And this is something that's happens across the country. I think New Jersey was trying to address that in that specific sector, and I think this is something that needs to be expanded across all other sectors, especially service, since the U.S. at this point is now a service economy. We're not really a manufacturer economy anymore like we used to be back in, say, like the 60s. So I think, bringing it back to the gubernatorial election, who's looking to protect them? I think this also goes beyond not just like immigrants issues, but just like um, other work like babysitting, and anyone can do that. A lot of high schoolers get into babysitting as well, and I have some coworkers who have told me that sometimes they've been stiffed by the people whose children they're babysitting for, and they'll be waiting 2 3 weeks to get paid. So something like that is like, this is something that everyone can benefit from. And I think that's something that we should look into like expanding. And I know that organizations like the Latino Action Network fought for this before I even knew about the organization. Um, so I think that sort of exploitation, which we see when in a municipality where there's a high population of immigrants, that's not only like a bill we want to pass, but ensure that these people even know that this bill is a thing.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Guys, I want to move on and make sure that we talk about the environment a little bit. I know, Mark, you've got that Substack that you're doing regarding Trenton Waterworks. I'm sure the environment and water, those two things are literally all over your desk probably right now. So, how about we touch on the environment, gentlemen? And Mark, I'm going to ask you to lead off.
Yeah, I can't remember a time when I've been less optimistic about the future of our planet. Um, I'm just finishing up Erin Brockovich's book, which is a fantastic read. She wrote it in 2016. It was year two of the previous Trump administration, and it's titled "Superman's Not Coming." I think that's what she says. Superman isn't coming, and it's basically a call to action. She basically lays out a template for you to address, look into your water, address environmental issues at the local level, and do things. And the first couple of chapters talk about that, like just sort of laying out that groundwork, and then the rest of the book spends a great deal of time talking about success stories around the country where she's been involved in affecting change. But these last couple of chapters at the end of the book are do talk nothing but about how the federal policies have been clawed back, how lobbyists for chemical companies are now in charge of the EPA at the federal level, and how that is trickling down all the way to the companies that are being investigated and what happens to those cases. The number of cases that are just being dismissed that were open
Mm.
with had them dead to rights with violating any number of water acts or environmental regulations, and the case just disappears. We saw that in fact, we saw it here in New Jersey with the Christie administration and the Exxon, in the Exxon pollution. That I think it was a $500 million at the time. It was going to be the largest fine ever, levied against a corporation, and that went away. And then on top of all that, we've got going all the way back to the Bush administration. We've got the how the Drinking Water Act was suspended for all of the wondrous chemicals that are being injected into the ground to remove natural gas, and all the things that that's doing to the water table. So this is an incredibly scary time if you're an environmentalist. And I recently joined the Sierra Club, I'm happy to say, and I'm getting a lot more involved in the organizations that are keeping tabs on this and spending a lot more time, over the last few months on this topic. But as I said, this is probably the most pessimistic I have ever been about the future of our planet and about the environment.
Mm. Mark, get a plug in for your Substack.
Yeah, it's trentonwaterworks.substack.com. The name of the Substack is called From the Mains of Trenton. It's a little play on words with the water mains issue. But yeah, it's been about 70 stories there at this point, talking about different aspects of the water department, studies that the DEP has commissioned on analyzing it and trying to help organize a stable future for the water department. So if anybody's interested in those topics, trentonwaterworks.substack.com.
Great. And Mark, I'm looking forward to doing a bit more of a deep dive with you on that, bringing you onto some of the other podcasts and things like that, so that we can just talk about that in detail, and you can pass it off to some other, experts in the area. Brady, thoughts from your perspective on the environment, and then we're going to finish up.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say that I love seeing your posts on Trenton Orbit. So it makes me very happy. I've been very much following the Trenton waterworks situation as well, because I've shown up to Trenton Council meeting when they had the DEP Commissioner Sean LaTourette, which was one of the most frustrating council meetings I have ever attended in my life. I was watching from my laptop with my girlfriend while we were preparing for a convention up in New York, and we got so frustrated we decided we stopped operations. We got in the car and we went in person, and I ended up even making a public comment at the end. And then like the next week, Trenton Waterworks had a public meeting here in Hamilton at the library to talk about the same thing. And from what I wasn't able to attend that, but my girlfriend was, and from what she recounted to me, she was on the other foot that day. Um, no, when it comes to the environment, especially water, we live along the Delaware River. Water is our whole life. Going up the county in Pennington, you have the Watershed Institute that does studies on how, the water and the watershed here in this area affects our living, how it affects the roads we build, the houses we build, the transportation we connect between different communities. Me right now, I'm studying. I'm pursuing a master's in urban planning, sustainable urban planning. So the environment is very much involved with what I do here, and it's something you can't play with. At the local level, I think this is something that, um, I think we can control a lot more at the local level. Seeing who's in charge of like the public waterworks. In this case, with Trenton Waterworks, it's the Trenton City Council. Although there are moments where sometimes it's dubious whether they're the ones making the decisions or someone else. Um, and issues like that, I think, is where we can mobilize a little bit more, and it's easier to see the wins there than looking at what's going on in the federal, you know. There's a lot of great organizations that are just fighting for like the environment all around the state in general, and I just want to give them a quick shout out because I think they're amazing. Sierra Club is one that we that was just mentioned by Mark. Um, New Jersey Future is another one that I've been slowly trying to get more involved with, as well as the Climate Revolution Action Network. They've been fighting all around the state, ensuring that PFOS is not, getting into our water. We're seeing that pollution going on up in North Jersey, South Jersey. Flooding is getting worse throughout the state, and so we're trying to find ways to, create infrastructure that mitigates the flooding, but we can still maybe use the water in more sustainable, renewable ways, and preserving our way of life and not destroying our houses and our environment. Because unfortunately, there's just a lot of constructions that happened back before we even thought, we were affecting the planet the way we were, and now we kind of have to fix those wrongs. Um, and specifically with the Trenton Waterworks is something that very much like worries me, because the city is largely minority, and whatever happens with the water, good or bad, is going to affect largely minority communities and then the surrounding suburbs. Um, and there's been ways to try and um, fix Trenton Waterworks. Fix I will use very loosely here because there have been attempts to privatize it. Right now, there's a movement to regionalize it, which I will say I am more in favor of. But now, what that structure looks like looks different to everybody else. For me, I'm trying to look at maybe like a public utility board that controls it, so it's not one municipality. It's just it's water. I don't think it's a water's not a profit. Uh, it's not for profit. You can't monetize on the necessity that everyone lives off of, because if it doesn't make profit, then people start dying because now you don't think it's worth it. And going into the new governor's election, I'm nervous. I'm nervous for the fate of Trenton Waterworks, because we don't know who's going to be the governor and how they're going to look at the public waterworks. Do they want to maintain it private? They want to maintain it public? Do they want to keep the control local, or do they want to just take it and make it state? We know that there are forces who are more in favor of privatizing, and that's something we don't want when it comes to a life necessity. But we want to make sure that it stays public, but while maintaining the a level of transparency and democracy, so that people who actually control and consume the water, um, have a say in it. And so, just I know it's a big ramble. I have so many opinions on this, but that's where I'm looking at it from. I'm looking at the governor's election locally through the waterworks.
Great. Well, Brady and Mark, thank you so much. This has been Trenton 365 presents Jacques R.E.A.C.H in partnership with the New Jersey Reporting Fellowship, Montclair State University, and New Jersey Spotlight News. Remember, friends, it's always about justice, peace, and humility.